I remind the captain, the starship enters the zone. Now entering the neutral zone.
Welcome to the Neutral Zone. This is Neutral Zone Chat with your pal Josh and John. John, how you doing today after the exciting episode that we had yesterday from Star Trek Discovery?
There's a lot to talk about, and if you see me grimace in pain, it's not because of the episode. I got into a fight with a Gorn at a bar last night, and my arm and shoulder are kind of messed up. It's actually, I was painting a room here, but anyway, but yeah, there's a lot to talk about with this episode, and I think you'll see some things. We had a lot of nice response from last week. I shouldn't say nice. We had a few people who were kind of upset with me with some of the things I said about last week's episode. There's a lot of disagreement on episode 5. A lot of people really liked it. A lot of people really didn't like it. I was kind of in the middle. I probably sounded like I hated everything on it. I liked a lot of things on it, but there were a few things I couldn't tie together. And a couple of, Kendall sent us a note, said the first time I strongly disagree with you guys, and he said that he thought that the episode was good. Another one also saying liking Pike, liking how that episode went. A few other people were like, John, what happened? You were all positive about it. Thought Sonequa Martin Green's character was great, and I think all the actors are great. My biggest problem has just typically been the writing has been a little bit off, and I couldn't embrace the whole bringing Dr. Hugh back into Among the Living with the way they did it. It was kind of weird, and I'm also thinking that might be an open door for Lorca to come back through the Mycelium networks. There were some things I had some issues with, but overall, appreciate everybody's comments. There was a lot of things to talk about, and there's a lot of things to talk about on episode 5, or episode 6, rather, because they did a lot of things. They must have listened to us, Josh, and they reshot the episode, and they made it exactly the way we liked it.
That's right. That's right. I thought it was a great episode, frankly, but there was a couple things I had trouble with, but I mean, nothing's perfect, but I thought it was exciting. I was engaged the whole time, which I can't say that I've been engaged in all the episodes all the way through.
Yep.
Sometimes it's been a bit of a chore because they have so many different, and they did a little bit of that. They mentioned Spock briefly in the beginning, and then they had the Dr. Hugh coming back part. But I mean, the majority of it was a pretty linear storyline, and it was nice to see. It was refreshing not to keep jumping back and forth, and I was really pleased with that.
It's kind of what we've both been saying. Star Trek needs to be about putting a fire out. And I know some people like some of the different things they're doing with these episodes, but I do think they've overcomplicated them with too many subplots. And this one was straightforward. There was a Red Angel tie-in, and there was a little bit more where we spent some time figuring out who the Red Angel is. And you're right, there wasn't really a Spock tie-in to, but this was a huge Saru episode. And of course, this tied into the short trek earlier this year. And I thought, big episode for Saru to see who this new Saru is. And it's interesting, if you remember, Josh, on the very first season 1 premiere episode, Saru was this, we should run, we shouldn't be this, a guy who was very much fearful, and I didn't like his character originally because of that. And this, we see a completely different Saru because obviously he's gone through this transformation, and that was pretty cool.
Well, he says in this episode that he's losing the thing that defines him, which is fear.
Right.
Which is kind of interesting. And then I think it's also interesting that his sister accuses him of not being very courageous, which is why he left.
Right.
I thought that was really good. But I mean, to have a defining characteristic of fear, I mean, I know people like that actually. Right. And it is kind of in a way, I think it's almost a redemption for the character, and I think it's a redemption obviously of the whole race of Kelpians. But I think it's a very interesting sort of character definition. If Spock is defined by logic, in the TOS, it's interesting that he's defined by fear and still yet overcomes it. I mean, he's not paralyzed by it, even though he has the fear. So I think that's kind of a cool little redemption of not only Saru, but the Kelpians in general.
I was very positive on Saru this year, and I've been saying many times he's like a mentor, and you see a little bit of this with his sister, who was very well played in this episode. But again, this to me was classic Star Trek in the new era. Because Saru was the main character. Pike was in there. He was large and in charge, but he was also Saru was the main guy here. And even Michael Burnham wasn't a massive character in this one. It was a support role. So this felt, again, a little bit more like the style of Star Trek that a lot of us who are the older school folks like. And you know what? A lot of people say, well, you got to get used to a new Star Trek. Well, I've been all about that. I've been saying since the beginning, this Star Trek is different than the other Star Treks, and I applaud that. But you still have some real important, you don't change mom's chili recipe just because the times are different. Sometimes you need to go with some standard things that are important, and this was a good standard episode. Now, part of I wanted to ask you, Josh, about this was as we predicted, this was going to be a big Prime Directive episode, and even within the episode, there were some controversies about that. What did you think? How did they handle the Prime Directive in this?
Oh my gosh! I mean, man, what do we say? The Prime Directive is a sticky wicket. It really is. And this is if the Red Angel had not stepped in, it would have been a great episode to show you why you don't break the Prime Directive.
Right.
Because without the Red Angel stepping in, the Kelpians would have been genocided. Is that a word? Right. Would have had a genocide against them? I don't know, whatever.
Wiped out, I think.
Yeah, they would have been wiped out. I mean, if not for the Red Angel stepping in and all this jazz, and maybe that's one could argue that's why the Red Angel brought them there, was to have that happen, but I mean, they really, and their logic I love the episode. I thought it was really good. So let me just say that. But when it comes to the Prime Directive stuff, man, do they get sloppy sometimes in Star Trek.
Yeah.
And I get it. I get why they did it. They were like, oh, well, they knew about warp drive, so we can interfere. I don't think that's how the Prime Directive actually has played out in other warp-capable civilizations, and I can't give you any examples, but it just seems like, without the Red Angel, take the Red Angel out, the Kelpians were dead. They were done. They were, the obelisks of death were about to kill them all. And we all know from Command and Conquer, if you remember that game, the obelisk of death is the worst thing that you can have. And frankly, that's what was going to happen. So I mean, they really disregarded the Prime Directive like in a massive way. So, and they're like, oh yeah, well, they know about warp, so it's fine to interfere with them. It's not the truth, you just don't interfere. I mean, that's what the whole point is. So, aside from that one little glitch in the Prime Directive thing, it's like, it's another sort of disregard of the General Order 1, which is like, that's the reason it's General Order 1. But other than that, I thought it was a great episode. I thought the Kelpians, turning around, so they had to do something to sort of justify their radical interference with everything, and that was how they did it. Maybe there was no other way around it other than to say, yeah, they're warp capable, so the Prime Directive doesn't apply to them. So, other than that, I thought it was great. Yeah.
And really, if you look at it from the historical perspective of Star Trek, Kirk was, of course, the guy who always ran in and said, if you look at the again, I'm not going to remember the titles of the episode, but the planet which was at war with its nearest moon, which was using computers to fight, and the planet said, we don't want you to interfere with us. And we interfered anyway because Kirk said this is not a growing culture. And there was other times like that. Next Generation, Picard was more of a conservative, if you will. He always was, we're not going to interfere, we're not going to interfere. And he typically did. So he a little bit drier on that. So we kind of see a little bit more of that frontier west with Pike. And again, you see Pike and his crew. You see a lot of respect. You see him upset with Saru, kind of being vocal early in the show and then back. But you see how Pike is really, he supports his crew. And he was very good as always in this episode. The issue I had with the episode, and again, not major, was, again, we had the big, the Ba'ul, I guess is their name, living in the oil pits. And Saru is building the communicating device, and these guys are supposed to have eyes on everybody, but yet they miss the fact that 20 feet away, Saru's making a little, device to communicate with Discovery. They miss that, and seem to miss everything else. And of course, and if you've watched any amount of Star Trek, you all were thinking what I was thinking. Is this the creature that kills Tasha Yar? Because it's the big oily creature.
The big oil slick, right.
Yeah. But you know what? He was kind of scary. Liked the voice. I actually thought he was a better, a more evil-looking character than the big blob that killed Yar. So a couple minor things there, but it wasn't a big deal. I do think, and we're not going to spend a lot of time on it, I do think they are setting us up for something going on with Dr. Hugh. We'll see how that unfolds. And then, of course, next week, very exciting. It looks like finally, Josh, we're going to see Lieutenant Spock.
Yeah, maybe. We've been almost seeing Lieutenant Spock every week for the last 6 weeks, right?
Well, this is the first time he showed up in a trailer, so we'll see if this is really...
It's like, hey, we found his shuttle, but the Georgiou was on it, and it's like, look,
Yeah.
we found his house, but it was like some monkey living in there or something.
Wasn't in? Yeah, it's interesting how they dragged this on. But again, we're up to episode 7 now. We're halfway through the season. So what are they going to do? But I thought overall, good episode, good Star Trek episode. I know online again, and we are the Pro Discovery podcast, believe it or not. And I know that a lot of people thought I was replaced by the evil twin last week from the other universe. But we are Pro Discovery, and I thought this was a great episode. I know there's some people who don't like it still, but I don't know what you're looking for, because this was great. This was great. Star Trek has its kitschy parts, but it's Star Trek. I mean, what do you want here? This is a fun show, and it does some cool things. And I still think Discovery has all the potential of being what I would consider a top 3 Star Trek franchise. Of course, I always put the original series up first, then the Next Generation. After that, I really don't have a big favorite. I wasn't a huge fan of Deep Space Nine. I liked Enterprise a lot, but I got lost in some of the whole time travel stuff they were dealing with. Voyager was good, but again, it just felt like another Star Trek. This is the first Star Trek series in a long time I feel like is different than the rest, but yet still embraces a Star Trek principle and still embraces kind of a Prime universe, but it's a rebooted Prime universe a little bit, because we can't be the same thing as we were in the 60s and the 80s. So I still think it has the potential of being a top 3 contender. Right now, I wouldn't quite put it there yet. I know you probably still feel Deep Space Nine is stronger, but I really think it has the potential, and I just would like to see it get there. We need a good Star Trek series that the base can rally around, and right now, for whatever reason, it's tearing the Star Trek fans apart. You're either one side or the other.
But I think if they had more episodes like this, I mean, I like what's going on. My only criticism of the season here is that they have too many storylines. Yeah, but I think that the storylines that they like, where were the Klingons? I mean,
Yeah.
And I forgot that Ash was a Klingon for a second, and it's like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
So I mean, there's just TNG, or I like TNG best, but that's when I grew up. But they always had a plot A and a plot B, and that's fine. And you can have like 3 plots. How many plots are there? I don't know. But otherwise, I think they're all very interesting, and I think they would be all cool to see all of them kind of play out on their own. But they're so intertwined, and we're halfway through the season, and sometimes I forget about stuff like Georgiou's around, and Admiral Cornwall, and there was a mirror universe,
and Reno's missing, and yeah. But I did like Ash in his new role. I again last week wasn't happy he was back, but yet the writers are doing some things now. This is where we get into these fights among the Star Trek fans. Some people say, well, he's different than what he was earlier this season. Yeah, I get that, and I have to throw some of it out. But I like where he was, that he was kind of like, I'm the Section 31 guy who's a little bit paranoid of the Red Angel. We're Pike, and I love Pike has a little bit. This is really going to, I think, boil down this season is going to be has been a spiritual journey for Discovery. Pike has a faith base that he kind of circles around a lot and seems to support the Red Angel as something for good. We see now Ash being kind of like, we need to be careful. Michael's not sure. So and of course, obviously, the Doctor's dealing with what's going on with Hugh, and I think it's going to be a shake your faith kind of a season that they're trying to maybe go for, and most of us are stuck in the mud looking at little details like communicators and uniforms, and I really think what the writers are trying to do here is create a let's shake the faith kind of a season where people are really questioning who they are, what they believe in, and maybe prejudice and so forth along the line. So again, this could be very fun by the time we get done with the season.
Well, I don't disagree with you, but I mean, it's just sometimes it makes it hard to watch.
Yeah. They've
like
got
that's why I like this episode so much. Is I like everything that's going on. Don't get me wrong, I love it all. I think it's all great, but sometimes when you jump from plot to plot to plot, it's just hard to watch. It's like, oh, what just happened, and why is Cornwall here, and all that kind of stuff. But this one was like really great because it was interesting, and it was like, what a cool. I mean, and it's even kind of based in some historical stuff. One of the things that I was thinking about when I was watching this episode was Rwanda. In Rwanda, it was very much a similar situation. And what happened in Rwanda is kind of crazy. Is that one tribe was basically subjecting the other one for decades, and then and I don't know who the Tutsis and the Hutus. I'm not sure who was who. So I apologize for my ignorance there. But what essentially happened is that the weaker tribe turned around and began to massacre the tribe that was in charge for so long. And it was just, I kept thinking about Rwanda there as I was because I've known people that were in Rwanda and who survived it, and it was a sort of that sort of thing that happened. And I wonder if that was sort of a little bit inspired by that, because it was like there's a lot of themes that happened in like Rwanda in the 90s and early 2000s that were very much present in the themes of this particular episode. Now, and I think maybe that's one of the reasons I found it so interesting is because, I think in the back of our mind, it was something that we sort of relate to because we've heard of this before, and it's something that's happened in recent memory.
And I think that's part of it. Obviously, we know Vietnam was part of the original series, and the non-interference directive was kind of related to that, and I think that's part of why they have it there is the fact that, okay, we're going to say we're not going to interfere with the culture, but when we see things that we know from a human perspective, we've seen this in the past, we know it turns out to be bad. As humans, we have to do something. We're compelled to be activists in some way. And I think that might be what the Star Trek debate what do we do in a situation like that? Do we let, this go along, or do we say, no, we're going to help somebody. We're not going to let a species be wiped out.
So this is interesting. And I'm just kind of thinking this right now, and you probably don't remember the answer, but I don't think we did anything with Rwanda, right? As the United States, I think we just kind of let it happen, right? The massacres and all those things.
It's one of those things where I'm sure we said we aren't going to, it's somebody else's problem, and we denounce it, and we're going to do embargoes, but we didn't actually get in there and do anything, probably.
Yeah, I really sort of wonder if the writers had that in mind. Because it is very much reminiscent of something that happened within our lifetime.
Well, and again, this is the thing that we say as Star Trek fans, and I talked about this a couple weeks ago. We don't write science. You don't write science fiction. You write for Star Trek, and Star Trek. This is what they do. It's what we tie into. And if they are doing this, and that's a great thing, and I should look that up. This is a great example of where science fiction writing is somewhat activist in this way that we can, and it always has been the way, and they've done that with this season of Discovery. They've tied in with some different things. They've looked at they mentioned isolationism again on this one, and so again, this is one of the things I like about Star Trek. I know people like Orville, I know people like Star Wars, but Star Trek really does, as they say on Law & Order, rip from today's headlines, do that kind of stuff a little bit, and I appreciate that. That's what makes this a series that's different, unique, and why it does get so much critical acclaim over the years.
I think it's Trek's expertise. I've mentioned them before, and I really like them a lot.
They're great.
Talks about, and they have a great YouTube channel, and one of the things they talk about is science fiction as a mirror, and like Deep Space Nine. Like, when was Deep Space Nine? Like 93, 92, 93? And what was going on there?
Mid-90s.
The Soviet Union had just crumbled, and there were all these satellite states like like Ukraine and all these things
all the stands,
that were like Bajor, and the Soviet Union was like the Russians, and so now we had this, and maybe they found some in this struggle between like the satellite states and the old order and that kind of. So probably we could. I thought about Rwanda, which is an old, really pretty relatively speaking, but I mean we could say the things going on in any country like Syrians
or places have
or the
had
Sudan
genocide.
Or anything like that. Yeah. So I mean I kind of have this. One of the reasons I think this episode was so good is because it awakened in me some things that I sort of recognized from current events, or at least past recent current events, and like what is the right thing to do. So when you look at an episode like this, and I talk about the Prime Directive within Trek, but I mean we have that same problem. When do we interfere as a country? When do we do this? It was very. I think it was very. If that was the intention of the writers of this episode, they did a very nice job of not cramming it down our throats.
Right.
They did a very nice job of sort of like making us think about, like, was it the right thing for Pike to interfere? Was it the right thing for them to, risk the ship in order to save the one crewman? Was it the right thing to free the Kelpians to evolve, in a way that wouldn't have happened otherwise? I think it calls back a lot of what's going on.
And Captain Giorgio getting in and being the one who rescued Saru originally, and also you see what happens with Saru when he sacrifices himself. Essentially, that he doesn't want to bring this on to his shipmates and so forth. So yeah, very, very good episode, and no episode is perfect. everybody can be a critic and come up with ideas to make something better. Everything's 2020 hindsight. But compared to last week, where I really struggled with some big gaping holes in the writing, I thought this was a much more tolerable. I sat back and thought this was great. It was a 56-minute episode. It was a long one compared to
it was long, but it didn't seem like
other
it.
ones.
It didn't seem
it
like
flew nicely. No. And again, then the promo comes up, and we think we might see Spock next week. So let's the Red Angel, the whole thing that the Red Angel could be a humanoid. Possibly a time traveler. I know there's some theories that it could be Spock.
Well, John, this is what I have to tell you something. I am the Red Angel.
Well, I could have bet on that.
Yeah, that's why. I mean, I'm not wearing my red suit right now, but later, as we record this, it's a Friday. Later on tonight, I'm going to put it on.
Well, you should. And I think that's probably as good of a theory as anything I've heard so far. So
that's right. Well, it's hard to get the wings in the car.
Well, yeah, that's true. Especially you call an Uber or somebody, and I got to get this in. You need like the larger Uber when you get in like that. So
you think that the wings would let me fly across town, but they are useless. They are for decoration only.
Well, and I'm an official drone pilot, and you've got no fly areas. You've got a 400-foot ceiling. It's difficult to be a Red Angel in today's congested air traffic space. So Josh, I'm looking forward to next week. And hey, if you like what you see, and we're getting more and more people watching this, we're a fairly new YouTube channel, and if you like Discovery, and you may not like everything we say, but we're a neutral zone, we're a safe space, and that's why I'm happy to. I try to respond to the discussion questions and people who you say that I've made stupid things on the show, and I'll be happy to. Agree with you that I sometimes have stupid things, but it's a safe place. So if you like us, share with us. We would love to see more and more people hop onto the neutral zone and have some constructive, positive talk about a really cool series.
All right, everybody. Well, thanks, John, for that insight, and I'm so glad you all joined us. And you can find us on Instagram. You can find us on Twitter and Facebook. All right, at Neutral Zone Chat. All right, everybody, thank you for joining the Neutral Zone, and we'll see you next time. Live long and prosper.